Okay. All right, you see Celesta? Excellent, and you can hear me and you can hear Celesta if she talks?
Hi, how are you?
No, is the volume on the computer? Yes. Okay, hold on a second.
I only hear through your... Yes, and I hear you now through this.
Okay, like I said, it's got a couple second delay, so as long as it's...
Yes.
Yep, okay, we're good.
I can hear you both just fine.
Excellent. All righty then. Well, it is 7 o'clock. So, hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining in for our first Town Book Center virtual event. I am so very excited. We've got Celesta Rimington here, author of The Elephant's Girl. And Celesta Rimington is an elephant advocate, a musical theater performer, a member of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and an active participant in her local writing community. While she can't actually talk to the wind like her character in The Elephant's Girl, she's had several close encounters with tornadoes. As a teenager, she worked at a zoo in Omaha, which is part of the reason she set The Elephant's Girl in a Nebraska zoo. Celesta now lives in Utah with her husband and 2 children, where they have a miniature railroad with a rideable steam train. Celesta's second middle grade novel, Tips for Magicians, is slated for publication by Crown Books for young readers and Random House Children's Books in the summer of 2021. You can connect with Celesta on her website, celestarimington.com. Hi, Celesta. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Drew. It's nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll forgive. I've got my my crazy COVID hair right now. I haven't gotten a haircut yet, but it's on the list, I promise. So first off, I've got to ask, where did you come up with the idea for The Elephant's Girl, and why did you decide to write this book at this time?
Well, I'd been writing with the intent to be published for a while. It had been several years that I'd been working on that goal, and I was reading aloud to my kids. We were going on a across-the-country trip, and while we were in the car, I was reading aloud to them the book The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. And they were enjoying the mystery of it and kind of the quirky characters that are in that story. And I got thinking, I want to write a book my kids want to read. I had been working on a young adult novel, and I enjoyed that. But I had written middle grade before, and I just thought, I've got to find something that I want to read when I was little and that my kids would want to read now. And at the time, they were the age that they were reading middle grade. So it was like a perfect fit for that. And I got thinking about, I love quirky settings. And when I was in high school, I worked at Omaha's Henry Doorly Zoo and Aquarium in Nebraska. Mm-hmm. It's a really big zoo. It's accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And it was kind of almost a magical experience for me working at that zoo. I loved having that backdoor access, kind of that opportunity to see the animals at different times of day and sort of see how a zoo works and be around the animals a lot. And so I got thinking about that as a possibility for a setting. And I thought about what could happen at a zoo and what would it be like if a child actually lived at a zoo, and would they create a special connection with an animal or several animals? And that's kind of where the story started. And then as far as like why write that book now, what's interesting about publication is that it takes a really long time. And you start writing a story and think, if you start writing a story thinking this would be a great story for now or for next year, it might take a couple years before it actually comes out. So in this instance, I just wrote a story that to me, the characters spoke to me, the adventure, the mystery, the desire to connect with family, and that feeling that kids get when they're in that middle grade age of self-discovery, wanting to know who they are, where they came from, understanding their place in this great big world, and the issues of friendships, all those things, just kind of came to me, and they seemed to matter at the time that I wrote it. It seemed to be something I would want to read when I was a kid. So I wrote that, but I actually started the book about 6 years ago. So it's surprising. I never would have known that this book would have been picked up my agent would have signed me, and then it would have been bought, and it would have come out at a time that schools were closed for a pandemic. Mm-hmm. It was a really interesting idea to me that happened when it did, at a time when I feel like kids really need connection, and they need something uplifting to read that feels like our current world, but maybe with a little magic to lighten the mood, a little sense of wonder.
Sure. No, yeah. I think that's absolutely something that people need right now. It's just something with some wonder in it. So did you always want to write middle grade? And how did you create a magical realism story that relates to, that specific age group so well?
I don't know that I always wanted to write middle grade, but I was a fourth grader when I decided I wanted to be an author. So I think that those two things sort of came hand in hand, that I met a published author. He came to our school, and I was really starting to read a lot more on my own and really starting to devour books myself. And so at that age in fourth grade, I thought, I want to be a writer. That's what I want to do. And so when as an adult, I started writing for publication with the intent that one day I hope to publish. The middle grade voice is really just what came out. It's just what seemed to be natural to me. And I think part of that's because I think I remember that time period in my life, that 9 to 13-year-old age range. I remember it very vividly, and I had a lot of experiences then that were very defining. I think we all do. We have defining experiences at that time of our life. And for me, it's really easy. Well, I wouldn't say easy, but it's natural for me to be able to sit with those memories and sit with those emotions a little bit and be able to think back on what it felt like to be that age. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's why I landed in the middle grade genre.
Very cool. Okay, awesome. So one of the things that I find whenever I read a book is I have in my head how something is supposed to be pronounced. So I'm gonna ask, Lex, I can do.
Yes.
Naya, Nia, what's the correct pronunciation there?
Naya.
Naya. Okay.
Yes.
So parts of Naya and Lex's relationship are obviously fantastical, such as, with the telepathy. How they relate to one another and elephant communication, though, feels very believable. So what research did you use to get this, and what's something interesting you learned while you were researching how elephants communicate in this story?
I love that question. I love talking about that because as I developed the story and I love elephants myself. I think they're amazing. And I thought I knew a lot about them before I started writing this story. But the more I realized I needed to research to write this book, the more I realized how much I did not know about elephants. And where I started was I wanted to know more about how they communicate with each other. And I was fascinated by their social groups and how elephants and elephant mothers and babies connect, and their herds and their relationships. So I started researching those things, and I came across the research of two elephant scientists. One is Katie Payne, and she wrote a book called Silent Thunder in the Presence of Elephants. And another scientist is Caitlin O'Connell, and she's a researcher, works a lot with African elephants. And she had done a lot of research about elephant communication and had discovered through some experiments that she did that elephants can detect sound through their feet. They actually have cells in their feet that register sound. They can feel the vibrations, and those vibrations then mean communication to them. And it's infrasonic, so human ears can't detect it. And so these rumblings that elephants make, Katie Payne, the first scientist I mentioned, she had been observing elephants and had recorded the sound of them. And while they were watching and just around these elephant herds, she noticed that she could feel this thumping feeling like on the sides of her head. And other people with her noticed it too. And she thought, what if there's sound here that we're not hearing? And so she took these recordings and she sped them up. And you can find it online. You can look it up. There's videos on YouTube of her talking about this, and she'll even play it for you, where she sped up this sound and you can hear the elephant ears flapping really fast because they sped it up, and then you can hear them talking. You can hear these rumbling sounds back and forth. It almost to me sounds like whales, but our human ears can't hear it. So as I researched that, I thought, wow, okay, this feels almost magical to me already. You know, it's science-based, of course, but it feels a little bit of the wondrous, you know.
Sure.
So I thought I could take that idea and say, all right, well, what if this girl had a reason that she could connect with the elephant on a different level than other human beings? Maybe she can't hear those rumblings. She doesn't have some superpower with her ears, but maybe she can feel them. And when she feels them, she can see the elephant's memories. So that's kind of how I took that research and then expanded it out into the ideas of a story.
That's awesome. So, I mean, speaking of research, look, I'll be honest, you've got me interested in researching elephants now. I didn't realize that was something, that was a way they communicated. That's really fascinating. What would be a good place to start? Where, if you were to tell me, okay, Drew, you want to start learning about elephants, here is where you should start. Where would that be?
Well, that's kind of, there's so many places to start. That's a good question, because I kind of, myself, I wanted to know, and I got surrounded by information so much that I was swimming in it. Mm-hmm. I think now, if I look back on what I found, that to me the best idea would be to look up nonprofit elephant organizations, nonprofit scientists and organizations that work in behalf of elephants, because a lot of people who contribute the information there are scientists and people who are concerned about elephant welfare. So you're going to get a load of information that's accurate rather than somebody just selling you on an idea or something. And so a couple of ideas would be Wildlife SOS. They do they do work with elephants and protecting them, and advocacy in India. And the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, they do the similar kind of work with elephants in Kenya. And they have a lot of information about elephants on those sites. But then from there you can find out about what you could do for elephants if you're interested in that. The next thing I'd recommend is those researchers I talked about, Katie Payne and Caitlin O'Connell. If you just look them up online, you can find their books, you can find videos. Caitlin O'Connell wrote a book that's geared toward juvenile literature, but it's full of actual photographs she took of elephants in the wild, and it's called, I have it here, The Elephant Scientist. I don't know if you can see that.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The Elephant Scientist, it won an award, the Robert F. Siebert Award, and it's full of photographs and scientific information about her research and her studies. She talks about their social groups. She talks about their communication, their body structure, their biology, and then she also talks about kind of their plight in our world and the ways that people can help. And then the last idea I would have for you, which is one of the things I did when I was researching for this book, is I watched a lot of elephant documentaries. And it's a fun place to start because you can hear them and see them, and it really helps you connect with the animal. One is a PBS documentary called The Soul of the Elephant. Another one is How I Became an Elephant, which was a documentary with the star of it is a 14-year-old girl who got really, really passionate about elephants and wanting to help them. And another one is called An Apology to Elephants. That one I would recommend maybe adults watch it first before they share it with children, because it can be disturbing. So there are parts of it that will make you angry and make you sad. So I would say adults should watch that first before deciding whether or not to share that with their children.
Sure.
But those are good places to start.
Awesome. Well, it's good that you bring up elephant advocacy, because you yourself are an elephant advocate. So yes. How would you suggest for kids that want to get involved and want to help elephants? Where do they get? It's not we anymore. I guess I'm not a kid, just a kid at heart. But where do they get started?
That's great. That's a great question to ask. I think sometimes kids feel very passionately about things and they want to do something, and then they feel like, where do I go? What can I do? I'm a kid. I don't have any money. That it can feel very frustrating. So it's really great. There is a website called Juliet Speaks, and it's JULIETTE speaks.org. And that organization was started by Juliet West, who is the 14-year-old girl that starred in the documentary How I Became an Elephant. She felt so passionately about elephants and their plight in our world, and she wanted to do something, that she raised enough money to be able to go to Thailand and meet with Lex Scheilert, who runs the Save the Elephant Foundation, and help to rescue an elephant from a terrible situation there. And she started this organization, Juliet Speaks, and she was just 14 when she started this. So that's what's great, is that kids who read The Elephant's Girl, who maybe want to do something, they can see other kids have done things. And on her website, she has information about ways to get involved. She gives kids ideas about how they could start a school club, how they could do fundraisers, finding nonprofit organizations to donate to with the money they get from a fundraiser. There's also reading lists, recommended websites and blogs that they can read so that they can learn more about elephants. Because the most important thing is to be educated first so that you know what the issues are. You know, you feel passionately about something, you need to know what's actually happening, know what the issues are, and from there you can learn how you can speak out about it. I think storytelling is a really great way. If somebody feels like they've connected with an animal of any kind, but specifically with elephants, they can tell that story, how they connected with an elephant or how they feel about it, and people are more likely to listen. I think kids can know that they can raise their voices, and those voices can speak in behalf of elephants. They can learn about what the issues are, where elephants are in danger, find those nonprofit organizations, and be an advocate and speaking out.
Okay, very cool. So in talking about your book, can you give us a quick synopsis of what goes on in The Elephant's Girl?
Sure. So The Elephant's Girl is about a girl named Lexington Willow, and that is the name given to her by the man who finds her because she doesn't know who she is or where she came from. She is found asleep next to the African elephant in the zoo following a major tornado. And she doesn't remember who she is or where she came from. And the train engineer at the zoo finds her, takes her in, becomes her foster father. And Lexington finds out that she has a special connection not only with the African elephant who saved her life, but also with the wind. Because of her unusual beginnings, she can hear the wind talking to her, and she can talk back to it, kind of in her mind. Mm-hmm. And then she loves this elephant and is so connected with it and wants to spend time with it. When she is finally allowed to participate in elephant training, which is part of their care, part of their regular care to make sure that they're healthy, she gets to participate in that with her best friend Fisher, who is the zookeeper's son. And she discovers that when she's near the elephant and looks in the elephant's eyes, she can feel its rumblings and she can see its memories. And from that, she goes on this amazing adventure with her friend Fisher to figure out what it is the elephant's trying to tell her. And that leads them on a treasure hunt for a missing treasure, and it leads them to search for information about Lexington's past.
Wow, very cool. So Lex, as you sort of said just now, has a really unique and interesting backstory that I don't think most of us have, and yet she's really relatable. So, you know, it doesn't feel like this is somewhere you go, oh, I don't know where you're coming from. So how did you manage that?
I think it's important to remember that even when we have different experiences from each other, that emotions are universal. And that's one of the things that I kept going back to. There are definitely elements of Lexington's life that have nothing to do with mine, but there are also things about her life and her background that I can relate to personally, which is, I think, why I wrote this story. It's why it's what came out of my head. I took experiences in my life that I relate to those emotions that Lex is having, and I was able to connect to her that way myself. I think if an author can connect to their character through the emotions the character is feeling and understand them in that way, then it helps it to be believable to the readers. So one example is that Lexington doesn't know who her family is. She doesn't know who she is, where she came from, and even what her parents' names were. And I didn't have that experience. I know who I am and essentially where I came from, but I did lose a parent when I was a baby. And because of that, I spent a lot of my childhood wondering how might I resemble my dad, who I never met. what traits might I share with him, or what things do I maybe do that because he did them, and how might my life be different if I knew him better. And of course, I have the means to get to know him, family members that can tell me about him, but Lexington didn't. So I was able to take kind of those feelings of wondering who you are and where you came from and why that would matter, and then translate that to Lexington as a character.
Okay. And it's not just Lexington. You've got a pretty wide range of really unique and interesting characters that all kind of mesh into this really cool story. Do you have any characters that are particular favorites for you, or just were fun to write? Or
Yes. I love all my characters, even the one that's supposed to be kind of the bad guy. There are things about him that I love to write. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that helped me with writing these quirky characters is that I grew up in an Air Force family. Oh. And I moved all around the country. I've lived in almost every region of the United States. And you kind of collect experiences and memories as you do that, as you move around. And I met so many different people from different backgrounds growing up and living all over the country that I think some of those unique qualities of different people kind of stand out in my mind when I'm writing a story and working on characters. So back to your question. I think I missed kind of. It's okay. I think I missed part of it.
You answered part of it beautifully, yeah. But do you have one that is, you don't want to pick favorites among your created, babies, so to speak, but do you have a particular favorite?
I think it depends on the day, honestly. It depends on, because I just finished reading the book aloud. At different times in the story, I would just kind of latch onto a certain character and say, oh, they're my favorite, or oh, they're my favorite. But I honestly think at the end of the day, it's a toss-up between Roger and Fisher. And if I had to pick today, I would say Fisher. But on a different day, I might say Roger. So Roger, for those of you who haven't read the story, is Lexington's foster father. And he's got a special place in my heart because I know what it's like to feel love from someone who isn't a biological part of your life, but they feel like family. And the character of Roger is also slightly based off of a grandfather of mine whose name was Roger. And in a lot of ways they're similar, in other ways they're very different. But some of Roger's traits, his kindness, his gentleness, his interest in machinery, how he loves history, and he loves old things, and his understanding of Lexington and willingness to let her be independent. Those are things I love about him. But what I love about Fisher, where he's Lexington's best friend, he's the zookeeper's son. I love that Fisher knows how to be a friend. And I think that he is the baseball-loving best friend that every girl would ever want. So, the fact that he believes Lexington, she has these unusual ideas and he believes her without question. He's supportive of her. He likes to go on adventures with her. And he just knows how to be like that loyal best friend. But at the same time, he has his own interests and his own ideas. So that's why I like him.
Hey, I like him. I mean, I've always been a big fan of the supportive best friend. There's something really kind of magical about it. Obviously when you're tackling something that has to do with figuring out who you are and trying to decide your identity, there's some difficult moments, some tough things that have to come up. What were some of the parts that were really difficult for you to write?
I think the moments that Lexington realizes that she has been so focused on herself and so focused on what she wants or thinks she needs that she's hurting people around her. Mm-hmm. Those were difficult moments to write because I know I've had those moments. I think we all have at times when we're focused on what we think we need and that someone we really care about may be hurting because of that. Other moments that were a little difficult for me to write were more because they brought out emotions of my own experiences. So and I don't want to give away any spoilers, but there's moments when Lexington discovers things about who she is and where she came from, and also about who her family is now and who really cares about her and how they've been showing that. And I think those were moments that were emotional for me to write. Not hard, like I didn't want to do it. But,
Sure.
Emotional work is work. If you're just writing about emotional things, but they bring up your own feelings about your own experiences, it's a lot of work sometimes.
Yeah, but it definitely shows through. It helps me as the reader be able to feel that. I think people can definitely tell when something is genuinely wrought, as opposed to, I know this is sad, I'm going to write that it's sad. Okay, great, and then you move on to the next chapter.
Yeah.
But since you answered my really tough question, what's one of your favorite things that you got to write without spoilers? I know obviously not everyone has read this, and I don't want to spoil anything. But if you can tell me something when you were writing it, you just were loving.
I love when Lexington gets brave, and she decides to leave the zoo. I don't think that gives spoilers. There are definitely things about Lexington where she has created this safe circle for herself in the zoo. She refers to it often as her island that she never leaves because it feels safe in the zoo. And outside the zoo is the unknown. It's where the tornado happened. It's where things that she doesn't remember happened. But when she decides to get brave and leave the zoo, she goes on an adventure with Fisher to be supportive of him and his baseball game. That was a fun part to write. Also, when Lexington and Fisher decide to go searching for the treasure that's missing, they believe there is a treasure hidden somewhere in the zoo. And they have this adventure, and they almost get caught. They set off alarms. They take off running. They go hide in the treehouse. I feel like that was a really fun scene to write because it was just fun adventure, the stuff that kids like to get into. A little bit of trouble, but not too much.
Sure. So earlier you mentioned that you had worked in a zoo at one point. It was in Nebraska. Is that why? That's why you chose the zoo setting, right?
Yes.
Okay. Very cool.
Yes, I chose that because it's what I relate to. It's what I know. I know what the weather is like in Nebraska, and I have a lot of friends there, and I know what the people are like and how they are with each other, kind of the culture. And also I did pattern this fictional zoo. The Elephant Scroll takes place in a fictional zoo, not in Omaha, in Lexington, Nebraska, which, as far as I know, doesn't even have a zoo. But I did use a lot of what I knew about the Omaha Zoo in creating this fictional zoo. Okay. And I did bring with me today, since we're talking about that, I brought with me my zoo shirt.
Oh, wow.
From when I worked there.
Evidence that it happened. Okay.
I still have it, yes.
Very cool.
From all I don't know if you can see, it says Omaha's Henry Doorly Zoo.
Very cool.
But yeah, I still have the shirt, and I have my name tag somewhere.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But found it in a box, and I thought, well.
Yeah, sure. No,
that's for some reason.
Yeah, when we're able to all meet again, you've got to take that. That's got to be the shirt you bring with you. That's got to be the tour shirt.
But I think too. Makes me look like I could, go work with elephants again. Yeah. on a sanctuary or something.
Yeah, no, for sure. So you had also mentioned that it was fourth grade was when you decided that you wanted to be a writer. What were you reading at that time that made you go, all right, this is what I want to do. This is what I need.
Oh, that's a fun thing to talk about. I don't think I could pinpoint it to one thing in particular, but some of the things that I was reading at the time when I was in fourth grade, I don't know if there's any fourth graders out there watching or will watch this later, but there's definitely emotional angst. You go through some stuff in fourth grade that's not easy. And you guys are brave and you're awesome. And I read a couple of books that were specifically about fourth grade, and I connected with them so much because there was something in it that I felt like, yes, somebody understands how I feel. And so one of those was Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. And that talks a lot about the angst of having a younger sibling who's often into your stuff and always feels kind of like the special one, and you're always the one that's in trouble for not taking better care of the younger sibling or something. Yep. So that one I related to a lot. And then there was another one called Fourth Grade Celebrity. And that one was humorous, but it was also full of a lot of the emotional stuff that you go through in fourth grade. And I think reading some of those books made me feel like I want to write stories that other people might say, yeah, I know how that feels. And it might make them feel like they're not alone, that other people know what they feel like. And then also The Westing Game, I mentioned that I was reading that to my kids, but I loved that book when I was in elementary school. And I always wanted to write a story that had a mystery to it. I don't know that I could ever write anything as brilliant as the Westing Games mystery, but I do like that mystery element. And I was also reading Summer of the Monkeys by Wilson Rawls. I think it's a lesser known, maybe not as many people know it, but, you know, he wrote Where the Red Fern Grows. But Summer of the Monkeys has these wild monkeys in the Ozarks that the main character discovers have escaped from a circus. And it's interesting, I didn't even think about that book when I was writing The Elephant's Girl, and I don't think the two are very similar at all, but I think the adventure of a boy trying to catch these monkeys and figuring out why they're loose in his backyard definitely influenced me somewhat.
Okay.
And I think that just reading all of those made me want to write.
Yeah, very cool. That's I think kind of the power of literature. So hopefully, you know, it's, you know, someone who's listening to this now, or if they're listening to it later once we've saved it, you know, when they read this, they get inspired too, and I'm sure they will. That's how it works. It's all just sort of part of a bigger chain of writing, I think. You mentioned that you're reading your kids The Westing Game. Do they read your books at all? Or have you read them your books?
Well, I told my kids that they're not obligated to read my books, but I will say that while I was working on The Elephant's Girl, it wasn't titled that. We called it the Zoo Book forever, because I didn't know what I was going to call it. And at different times, I would ask my kids, hey, can I read this chapter to you? Or will you read this chapter and just tell me what you think? And they were always really excited to do that. It wasn't like, do this because Mom said. But every time they would say, Mom, you got to finish that book. Finish that book because I want to read it. And so I always knew that when I finished this book, they would be excited to read it because they're the ones that pushed me to do it. They're the ones that said, Mom, please finish. So yeah, they've read The Elephant's Girl. And then my son, who is 14, has read Tips for Magicians, which is the next book I have coming out next spring.
Very cool. So if I were to ask them, what would be their favorite part? If they could all agree on a thing that they went, this is spectacular, what would that be, you think?
I think they would agree that the climax and the reveal moment in the story where you discover what is this mystery and what is it that Lexington's been searching for, I think that's their favorite.
Okay, very cool. So you mentioned that you're working on, or you have, is it ready yet, or is there's still a couple tweaks?
It's super close.
Okay.
This is funny timing for me to tell you this, but Tips for Magicians copy edits are almost complete and they're due tomorrow.
Oh,
so,
wow, that's awesome.
So that's how close we are. Once I turn those in, then we're just, the next time I see it, where I would have any say, about it, I will be looking at proof pages, which are essentially the final product, except I can maybe, if I find a few things, I might want to tweak a word here or there.
Sure.
But it's pretty much locked in at that point.
That's very
so we're almost
cool.
done. Yeah.
So where can people get your next book? Where is that going to be?
It will be available everywhere books are sold and through Random House Children's Books, just like The Elephant's Girl. I will always have buy links or pre-order links on my website, which is celestarimington.com. And as soon as we have a cover to share, I've seen the cover, but, I'm not sure if they're going to be tweaking it anymore, and I'm not allowed to share it yet.
Okay.
But as soon as I have a cover to share, I will be putting that on my website, and it will be up on Goodreads as well, so people can start adding it on Goodreads. And so if people follow me on Goodreads as well, they can add The Elephant's Girl, put up the reviews for The Elephant's Girl, and they can also add Tips for Magicians when it shows up.
Very cool. So is there anything that you're reading right now for you? It's a question we ask everybody in the store. What are you reading?
I am reading an amazing book. It's a middle grade novel called Turtle Boy, and it was written by M. Evan Wilkenstein. And it also came out from Random House Children's Books probably a month or two before The Elephant's Girl. So it's a 2020 debut novel, middle grade. And it's about a boy who has a minor facial deformity that is going to cause him to need to have surgery. But as part of that, he's an introvert and he's self-conscious about his face. And he also kind of gets this unfortunate nickname, and he's bullied at school where they call him Turtle Boy. Mm-hmm. What I found so interesting is that in The Elephant's Girl, Lexington is bullied at school as well, and they call her Elephant Girl. And so it's really interesting to me that without knowing each other, two authors wrote two completely different stories, but there are these elements of our stories that really have some connection to them. Mm-hmm. And what I love about Turtle Boy is it's also another middle grade story about self-discovery. And the main character, Will, he meets a boy named RJ who is, he's got a terminal illness and he's in the hospital. And Will it's hard for him to make friends. He's an introvert, and RJ is an extrovert, and he's this rock star, and he's not a rock star. He's like this kid who is a rocker. He loves to listen to rock music, and he's got a drum set, and he's kind of loud, and it's just everything that Will is not. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of scary for Will to get to know this kid, but when he does get to know him, he starts to care about him and understands that he's looking at a shortened life. And he finds out that RJ has a bucket list, and Will decides he's going to do RJ's bucket list. And the connection that the two form is just really special. I haven't finished it, but it's a really good book, and I'd highly recommend it to anybody who wants a good middle grade self-discovery. Something is a good read aloud for families as well. And another thing I love about it is that Will is Jewish, and I like being able to peek into these windows of lives that are different than mine and understand them better.
Sure. Very cool. So this next question is one that I think is great for anyone who's watching or will be watching that wants to be a writer. I know that I've tried a couple of times, and I hit that writer's block, or I just get to a thing where I go, I don't know what to do with this. How do you work through that, and what advice can you give for someone who's having those kinds of troubles?
Troubles with writer's block, yes, and kind of moving forward on a story they're working on?
Yeah.
That's tough. I think sometimes it can be good to step back from a project and think of your creativity as a well that needs to be replenished. And that sometimes writer's block, I think, happens because we haven't really been refilling that creative well like we need to. And so sometimes taking a step back and setting the project aside for a short period of time and writing something different. Mm-hmm. Sometimes just getting up in the morning and writing a couple of pages as stream of consciousness, where you just get out all of your thoughts, and sometimes writing that stream of consciousness will get out your worries, your frustrations, the things that are kind of blocking your brain. And you get those out, and those are pages that you just throw away, or you keep them in a notebook and you don't really go back and read them for several months. I learned that from Julia Cameron, and she wrote a book called The Artist's Way, and I found that book to be incredibly helpful. She talks about nurturing your inner artist and making sure that you take care of that creativity side of yourself. She talks about writing those pages to kind of it's like you're priming the pump. So that's something that you can do to work through if you're just kind of having a creative block. Mm-hmm. Another thing, if you're stuck on the story itself, meaning like, I don't know where the story is supposed to go, or I've kind of written myself into a dead end, I have found a couple of craft books to be really helpful. One is Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and that it takes the Save the Cat idea, which is for screenwriters, mm-hmm, and it turns it toward novelists, and how you can use the beats that Blake Snyder talks about in Save the Cat that they use for movies. You can use those same beats for writing a novel. And reading that book, Save the Cat Writes a Novel, has helped me kind of take a step back from a story and look at the different pieces and how they need to come together, and also to look at, all right, what needs to happen in this climax? And then you can kind of go backwards and see if the climax needs to be here and this is what needs to happen, then what do I need to do to back it up so that I get to that point. So those are a couple of ideas. I don't know if that's
yeah, no,
what you meant.
That's helpful.
Does that help?
Helpful
Okay.
to me, at least, selfishly.
Okay, good.
And you mentioned that it was 6 years from when you wrote The Elephant's Girl to when it came out. How long was the writing process for you? I mean, what's that? What was that like?
Well, like I said, about 6 years ago when I started the idea, and then I wrote probably 10,000 words, just to kind of feel out the characters, to sort of get the setting and just get all the ideas out there. And then I looked at that and I said, this isn't how I want to tell the story. Now I know more about the setting. Now I know more about the characters. This isn't how I want to write it. And I probably did that where I would start again and write 5,000 words, 10,000 words. Sometimes I think the most I got up to was about 25,000 words, where I found out this is still not the way I want to tell the story, and I started over. So that is a very roundabout way. You know, I think every author has different methods, and I've heard other authors say that they'll write an entire first draft and actually throw it away and then start again. I didn't do that, but I definitely had 2 or 3 different starts of the book that I then started over and completely opened a brand new document and did it again without looking at the old one. And that's how I finally came to, what point of view do I want? Do I want it to be in first person or third person? What time period do I want? And what is Lexington's voice? Just really getting her voice right, and understanding how to do Fisher's voice. And I there was a time when I was going to do alternating chapters between Lexington and Naya, and actually have Naya have a voice of some sort. And I had tried it in free verse, because I thought an elephant is not going to talk like people do.
Sure.
And eventually came to what we have now is the entire story is in Lexington's voice, and no alternating viewpoint chapters. And that what she sees and the communication that she gets from Naya is in images instead of in words. And I'm excited because I think that's the story I needed to tell. I think that's the way it needed to be. And I didn't get to that until I actually did the elephant research.
Sure.
Once I really dug deep into that elephant research and learned what I learned about communication between elephants, that's when it really came together. And I said, no, I don't need an elephant voice. I need elephant thoughts. Yeah. And that's when it came together. So once I got to that point, I actually had a very solid outline, and I had gone through, I used a couple different methods of plotting. One was the Save the Cat Beats, and another one was the Farmer System of Narrative Analysis. I kind of looked at that a little bit. I just took bits and pieces of different things, and I had a pretty solid outline. And that was in October of 2017. And I was coming up on NaNoWriMo. For those of you who don't know, that's National Novel Writing Month. And it's every November. Writers can get together, and it's free to create an account on the nanowrimo.org website. And you can connect with other authors and keep track of your word count. And you make a commitment for how much you're going to write. And you try to write a book in 1 month. And I decided I'm going to do it. I know this story enough. I have started it so many times and restarted it so many times, and I have an outline. I know the characters, I know the setting. And so I set that month aside, and I just worked really hard, and I wrote 90% of the book in 1 month. But that's after all of those years of figuring out what I needed to do.
Sure. With there being the mystery element, and I'm not going to spoil anything, was that, and it sounds like, you're a bit of an outliner with it. Was that something you had and you knew this is going to be the mystery we're going to have, and you built around it? Or did you have other parts of it and then it sort of coalesced into what it was?
I think that it's more accurate to say I knew how the mystery ended. I knew what the reveal was going to be. And then I had to go through several iterations of how we were going to get to that. And what the clues were going to be. There was a different version that I can't really share, or I'll kind of give away some stuff, but there was a different version of how Lexington discovers the mystery and how she discovers information about the treasure that she's looking for. But ultimately, I was always working backwards from what the reveal was, what the answers were of the mystery, and then I worked backwards from there.
Very cool. Okay. Oh, sounds like I've got a little bit of an echo. That should be fine. Well, anyway, my last question for you. You've been so gracious and so wonderful in taking your time to talk with me today. And as much as I want to hoard you for myself, if other people want to reach out to you for author interviews or for school visits, whether it's virtual or hopefully someday soon in person, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Sure. The best way is to go to celestarimington.com. And there is a contact page there. People can contact me through the contact form. Mm-hmm. There's also a place for author visits that you can look at and see what things I offer for schools. I'm willing to do online author visits for schools, and excited about doing that and connecting with schools that way while we have to be safe and do it online. Mm-hmm. But eventually I hope to be able to do that in person. But celestarimington.com, go to my contact page, and that's the best way to reach me.
Okay, perfect. Well, just so everyone knows, The Elephant's Girl is available here at Town Book Center. You can come in person and pick it up. You can place an order with us online. We'll deliver it to you, or we can do curbside pickup, whichever you prefer. And if you felt like, oh my God, they keep talking around this mystery and they're not telling me what it is and that's really unfair, that was the plan. So now you have to read the book to figure it out, and it is good. I'm not going to lie. It's a good one. So Celesta, thank you so much for taking your time to talk with me today and with everybody. We really appreciate it, and I can't wait to see the next one, the next book on the shelves. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. Have a great rest of your day.